So I grew up around quote unquote fashion. My mom I was born in the Philippines. So my mom grew up with her aunties were all into like making garments, because there's like an area in the Philippines, and it's really still a very country that still appreciates make to order, custom work, and things like that. And so she grew up kind of in that sphere and so when she came over here and we came over, you know, she was an immigrant, and that was a talent she had, and so she capitalized on it, and she ended up having like her own little dress shop and alteration shop for the longest time. So, you know, well, of course when you don't appreciate what you have, so, but I did learn a little bit from her, and then I didn't realize it was something that I would want to do until really late in high school. I didn't take art till almost my senior year. I was like, what am I going to do? I think I like fashion, but I hadn't taken any art, so I didn't have the best portfolio in the world, but I did get into art school, thank goodness. And of course, when you go through Art Foundation, you don't always just do your discipline. So it was nice to have that foundation year to really explore, but I kind of knew going in. And then the fashion side is, you know, yes, when you study fashion, supposedly you love clothes. Well, I love fabric. I love the history behind costume and dressing. How can you push boundaries? How can it be a design discipline for change? It's so faceted. I try to bring in something unique to every class session when I'm talking to my students, so they can crack that egg that they think is fashion that only has one yolk in it, but no, this fashion egg has lots of yolks, right? And you can make a lot of things with those yolks. So I talk about fashion like a vehicle that can take you anywhere. And I also tell like the incoming class or prospective students, I say, when you get on the fashion bus or the fashion train, it's the best train or bus, because it's going to stop here, let you do this, it's going to stop here and let you do that. So a career may not be fashion specific, but what you learn as a fashion and as a designer of fashion is so applicable and transferable that you will come in your brain is not the same as everybody else coming into that same position. So that's kind of how it happened.
Wow, that's amazing. You mentioned that in your biography that you work with sustainable and eco-friendly materials. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I don't as much, but I teach a class specifically called Fashion and Sustainability. And so those students are both merchandising and design students and some non-majors. And essentially we look at the quote unquote word sustainability holistically, because it's very complicated and nuanced. There's so much good conversation around fashion and sustainability right now though. But what we try to do there is not perpetuate misinformation. There's a lot of it out there. People love to drop these kilograms of this and this weight of that and these pounds of this. So we're not allowed to speak about those types of measurements without some background checks or fact checking. When it comes to the studio and actually using materials and things, we repurpose zippers. We repurpose fabric. We have textile recycling out in the hallway. I don't know if you saw it. That's another little project of mine called Pop-Up Stop. It's a research project. This is all this gray and you see here is dead stock. It was donated. So we do everything we can to not be wasteful. And then the studio is beyond sophomore year. It's kind of like salt and pepper. It's always going to be in there in the studio. They always have to consider, you know, what are they using? Why are they using it? Where did they source it? What's it made out of? I mean, what's the end of life? I mean, there's so many of those questions. And not everybody comes into fashion thinking they have to ask or answer those questions.
Right.
Yeah.
So can you describe your process as a designer? Like how exactly do your ideas come about? How do you begin to formulate them into an actual piece?
Gosh, I think, you know, you see something or you hear something or you read something, and, you know, our brains are kind of crazy. Artists' brains are a little crazy. And that one thing that starts to bubble, right? And you go, and then you think, has this been done before? Well, if it has, how can I do it different? And has it been done before? It's hard to say that there's anything out there in fashion that has not been done, unfortunately. So what's exciting about that part of the field is the innovation in textiles, right? All
Right.
these things that they're making fiber out of. But then again, yeah, color, right? I mean, we're all drawn to specific colors for all kinds of reasons, whether it's cultural or whatever.
Yeah.
Emotional. I don't know. I think we all have. I think as you get older, as you've done this enough, like what you design now in your senior year, and you fast forward 10 years, you look back and go, oh, why? What was I thinking? Who was I then? And even these students in just one semester, they've changed so much in how they look at design. Because it's all about problem solving, right? And it's user centric, right? Which is different from art, because you don't have to quote unquote use art. There's no function.
Right.
But when you have a three-dimensional form or product, it has to do something.
Yeah.
Kind of, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I read up on your little biography that if you could explain just a little bit in a little bit more detail, like the need to address and analyze how the fashion industry's reaction to becoming more sustainable will affect the content and instruction of what is taught to fashion students. So what you were like sort of talking about there.
Yeah, so that happens mostly, I mean, not everyone is it's the thing, not everyone is comfortable speaking about it because they don't want to speak incorrectly, right? So unless you're reading every report, unless you're listening to every podcast and there is news sometimes. Actually, NPR does do news on fashion sometimes. It's interesting because all this legislation is coming down the pipe, right? So the question is, how does that inform the classroom? Well, I mean, the challenge is giving the students the most current information. And so that's a lot of work. You gotta be on top of your game. Like, sometimes I can't prepare for the class until almost the day before because something happened. I have to change the lecture. And you know, that's all behind the scenes work. The students don't kind of know. They just want the information. And but yeah, I mean, like a world crisis could change a lecture, right? Like what happened in Pakistan. Like you could attach so many lectures just to that, right? Social justice, and they you know, that country gives, or their production of global emissions is 1%. But yet, look at the devastation they have suffered for what? And we talk about COP27. You know, we talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So yeah, it's really layered. And I could talk about that nonstop. Like I could talk really 24 hours without going to sleep just on that one topic.
Wow. Yeah. I can't imagine having to teach that. Yeah.
And how do you do it in 15 weeks?
Right. Yeah.
You know, an hour and 15 minutes.
Because for all you know, like a week afterwards, it can be.
Oh yeah, some of the documentaries I can't even talk about anymore because they reported misinformation, but they didn't know then that there wasn't accurate information. So it's not about saying who's wrong, and it's, you know, the industry has to come together with other industries if it's really gonna do anything right. Because you can't. It's been linear for so long. You're gonna have to bend it in more than one place to actually make it circular, which is the goal of so many industries, and that's gonna take a while. So,
So what is your personal favorite part about fashion and just the overall, your overall just, you know, life as a teacher here, and like, you know, just overall, like, what do you enjoy so much about fashion and design that has made you want to just sort of share that with other students?
well, I asked that of my students as well, and almost 80% of the response to that question is individual style, personal representation, individuality, right? And those are so important, especially when you're young. And I do think that is important. I think we have a very kind of myopic view of what dress is. Because if you haven't been to Asia, if you haven't been to Africa, if you haven't been, I don't know, just even to Europe, we all don't dress the same. And the history of clothes comes back. It's amazing. And we have a lot of students who will do their undergrad in design and then do their master's work in costume or fashion history, because it's an amazing topic. Like one of my students right now is working on her PhD.
Oh wow.
Anyway, like I talked about a bifurcated garment, and the students like, what are you talking about? I said, women have not been wearing pants for very long. Do you understand this? So it's power, it's politics, it's status, it's, I don't know what fashion isn't. I mean, challenge me. I can't tell you what it is. You just, I mean, one day we maybe will be able to eat it. Who knows? But that's the only thing we can't do right now is ingest it. I think. But I think it can do almost everything else, right?
So just that dynamicness, like that sort of.
Yeah. They say when you take a person that's been incarcerated and you take them out and you give them a fresh, quote unquote, suit or business attire, they change.
Right.
It's like everyone should have it's like there's like a fairy godmother always out there floating around, a fashion fairy godmother. And yeah, and I think people who just get dressed every morning, they take for granted, where did your cotton come from? Is that shirt, was it extracted from an oil well? Did you buy it secondhand? Who touched it? Who sewed it? Why is it this color? You know, and because it's such an industry, which is a dirty word, it's such a business, another dirty word, kind of an art. Those words you don't like to use in art, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's all those things and so much more. So, and we only have these students for 3 years because they do foundation first. So it's like, how do you get all of that in 3 years?
Right. Yeah.
And then push them out of the nest.
And so for you as a designer, what are some of your influences, or like either other artists or any other particular sort of subject?
So I love vintage.
Okay.
And of course I love all of the predictable answers of designers who have left us. I'm enthralled with the short career of Christian Dior, specifically because of the influence of his sister, and people don't know that story. I went on my own fashion adventure to go to his home when he was a child. I went to a brand new exhibition housed at the Dior flagship on Avenue Montaigne, and it was literally a fashion life-changing experience. I love Yves Saint Laurent for what he's done for women, and what he's done. We wear everything we wear. Essentially, you can point your finger right back to something he did between the 60s and the 70s, right? And of course, he is a prodigy of Christian Dior. Another person I love is Cristobal Balenciaga, and Balenciaga right now is having a major bad moment. But the man himself was an incredible engineer, and he invented fabrics, right? He invented styles that we use now in nomenclature. What else do I like? I love my heritage. The Philippines has its own style of dress, and the Philippines just launched in September their maiden issue of Vogue.
Wow. Yeah,
and I got a copy thanks to my other Filipino colleague whose dad was coming home, and I said, if he can bring me that issue. And so now my mom has it wrapped in plastic and she's going through it, looking at it right now. Who else? I mean, there's so many people, names that the students don't know, so I throw them out to them. Madame Vionnet, Madame Gray. They're the ones that took fabric and turned it in the other direction and created beautiful gowns. But at the end of the day, most of the things I'm drawn to are architectural and engineered, right? It's all about balance, line, proportion, all those things you learn in art and design school. You apply them. Why is that seam sitting there? You know, what's the math here? She had to do math to figure out the pleat, because there's so much math in fashion. These poor students, they were so flustered the first 2 weeks. We didn't know, you don't know fractions? Well, you're gonna know fractions really well right now. But yeah, it's physics, it's fractions, math, just the tactility of it. And you work with people nonstop.
Right.
So you gotta be a people person.
It's collaborative.
Yeah. And there's more and more. You're not this little designer anymore who sits in your little crystal palace and just does this. No, that's not what fashion is anymore. So, yeah.
Okay, I guess my last question is, what is your, do you have any advice for any inspiring artists or people who are thinking about going into the fashion field, and sort of how to go from there and work their way up?
Well, we get that question a lot, something to that question usually from parents who come in because they want their students or their children to have viable careers.
Right.
And we're like, you can't put a value dollar sign next to the word creativity.
Right.
Because there are so many things you can do with a creative degree, a BFA in whatever creative field. You can work in automobiles, you can work in energy. So my advice is, if this is your passion, it's 4 short years of your life. Live your passion, because you will regret it if you don't. And you will find the way. The world or the universe has a way for you to apply that passion in an industrious and livable way.
Right.
And because I hear a lot of students who are squashing that art passion in them. I'm like, I'm not your parent, but you will regret it. I really do believe that you don't have even if you try it for 2 years and you don't like it, or you realize maybe you aren't that good at it, you'll go somewhere else, it'll always be with you, right? You regret what you didn't do, not so much what you did do, right? So that's my advice. Yeah, we're a speck in the universe, we're only here for a short time as well. So I say take advantage of what we have when we have it.
All right, I have just one last question that's sort of off script. Out of all the work that you have done, what has been one of your favorite pieces that
Oh my gosh, so I have been asked to make so many of my former students' wedding dresses.
Really?
Yes, and so that really ups the bar, right? Because it has to be perfect. So probably a couple of those. Yeah, I would think those. And is there anything super crazy that I've ever made for someone? I worked with this woman for a really long time, and she only wore what I made her.
Really?
She would buy her blouses and her scarves. She wore beautiful Hermes and Chanel scarves, but she'd have this little jumper style that she would just buy the best fabrics, and she would literally mail them to me and say she had 3 styles that we developed to fit her body, because she was older and she was very utilitarian. She needed pockets in a certain place, she needed buttons in a certain place. And she goes, okay, I want this one for that and this one for that. And we did this for 15 years. I used to meet with her in person, then she moved away. And we had this little relationship for the longest time. She's no longer with us, unfortunately. And she actually did give me one of her Hermes scarves back in the day. So I think those things that really will that affect their lives. When they see their dress, hopefully they remember, oh, my teacher, my professor. I worked with her, we designed it together.
Just those memories and all that. Yeah.